Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out, and welcome to Chamber Chat. We're so glad you could join us for this live recording inside the Chattanooga Chamber's Connection Conference Center powered by EPB. And we have a special guest joining us today. Tim Kelly is Chattanooga's 74th mayor. He grew up in Chattanooga, attended undergraduate school at Columbia University, and earned an MBA from Emory University's Goizeta School of Business.
On my Emory side today.
He's a businessman with several successful ventures, including co-founding Chattanooga's professional soccer club that just wrapped up an amazing 2022 season. Here are a few fun facts about Mayor Kelly.
Uh-oh.
He's a drummer.
Yeah.
He's played in New York City during college, so it should come as no surprise he's attended Bonnaroo over a dozen times. Also, he is a not-so-secret rock collector, so maybe in his next life he'll be a geotechnical engineer.
That's right. Could be.
So let's give a big round of applause for Mayor Kelly. Let's get right into it.
Okay.
You've been mayor for over a year now. How do you think it's going? Is the job what you thought it would be, and what's the highlight thus far?
Yeah, it is what I thought it would be. I mean, again, I ran under the premise, like most of you, that in executive politics, business experience is really useful. The city is the 9th largest employer in the region. It has 2,600 employees. And most of what I've spent my time doing is, rewiring, reconfiguring, attracting talent. It's all kind of the duck's feet going like mad when you don't see much above the surface. But most of the work has been that, which is exactly what I thought it would be. I will say it's been more challenging, but it's essentially what I thought it was. I will say at the same time, of course, we have to deal with all the external factors, and there have been a few of those. We've had our fair share of challenges in the sort of typical political sense. But for the most part, I think it's going well. We're making progress, on the thesis that I came into office with, and so I'm encouraged. I guess I'd say the thing I'm proudest of is still, the team that I've been able to attract. It's hard to compete with the private sector, for municipal salaries. It's tough. But, by selling, and again, many of you know this in the corporate world, people don't come to work. Pay is never number one, right? It's 3 or 4. And if you sell the opportunity and build a strong culture at any organization, you'll do well. Attracting people not only who are there for the right reasons, but who are really engaged in the work. And we've been able to attract some fantastic directors. Some of you this morning have said some kind words about some of those people who really believe in what we're doing and believe in Chattanooga's potential. So that's probably the thing I'm proudest of.
Great. I know you've been working on economic development, and that's a key role for both the chamber and the city.
Yeah.
What's your philosophy on economic development?
Well, I guess, if every politician has a theory of change, and we have a lot of lawyers in politics, and I feel like a lot of them feel like they can change the world with law. And, law is important, a lot of lawyers in the room, but law to me is the hardware and businesses, or the economic growth is the software, right? They're both important, but law is the framework that economic growth that provides, the ability for economic growth. But if we're going to change people's lives, right, it's going to be through economic growth, and particularly here, one of the main things that we're working on is closing this wealth gap between the black community and the white community, between rich and poor, not making the rich poorer, but lifting up communities that have historically been disadvantaged and haven't had the opportunities. And there's only one way to do that, and that is through economic growth. So I spend the vast majority of my time, as Christy knows and Charles knows, working on economic growth. I consider myself to be the chief salesperson with Christy, of course, for Chattanooga and for the chamber. So, and again, we've got some exciting stuff in the hopper, so I think it's going well.
For sure. This leads me to my next question. The One Chattanooga plan is something you talk a lot about, and we like how it activates the Velocity 2040 vision. Mm-hmm. Can you give us an overview of the plan and some of the progress that you've made thus far?
Yeah, so the plan I'm not going to launch into the lecture, right? The plan, I know it pretty well, 40 pages. If you need to get to sleep tonight, you can go download it from the city website and check it out. But there's 7 main goals, and there are 11 principles, as I've said many times, because many of you probably read Peter Drucker, Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast. And as I said at the top of this, rebuilding culture at the city is a really important part of the project. But of the 7 goals, one of them is building a competitive regional economy. I came into office very much worried about Chattanooga's position, having read a book called The New Geography of Jobs. And the thesis of that was that jobs, really higher wage jobs, are aggregating in larger metros. And we're pinched between 2 of them, in Nashville and Atlanta. And that is true. Now, COVID kind of maybe tilted things back the other way a little bit, but Chattanooga really has to carve out its space, and I think we're making some great progress in carving that space out. So building that regional economy is really key. Responsive and effective government is one that gets overlooked a lot, but I think if we had it to do over, to redraw the 7 goals, we would probably put that one first or last, or somehow depict it graphically as the enabler of the rest. I still hear people, talk to me about potholes and and we've done a lot with potholes, right? And I used to think of that as kind of just a campaign thing, but it occurred to me, frankly, after I was in office, that stuff's important, because if government can't do the simple things right, then people aren't going to trust it to do anything beyond that, right? So that stuff matters, right? Building a government that works better. We're in the middle of reconfiguring the website, the city website, and rethinking the way that we interface with residents to make it easier to do that. I mean, we have a lot of possibilities that are available to us now with technology that we didn't have before. And so I'm excited about that one. And then, of course, rebuilding or restoring vitality to the Black community in Chattanooga is also another one of those very specific goals. Probably the most controversial because people are like, well, why just the Black community? And I guess the point that I try to make to people is that this is not an ideological thing, it's not a political thing, but if you look at the numbers here, the middle class has been decimated across America, but particularly here. African Americans have suffered disproportionately, and a lot of the people that worry about public safety and concentration of poverty. I mean, it really is a huge issue, and it's one that's been swept under the rug because it's not something people like to talk about publicly. But if we're going to make progress as a whole, as a community, it has to be addressed. And as I said before, I mean, we address that by better jobs, better schools, public safety. Some of the other things we're working on. And I will say, you didn't ask, but Mayor Wamp shares that passion for education and for building people up through a properly resourced educational system. And so that's the main thing that we're really working on. I'm excited about that.
That's great.
Yep.
We do not take potholes too lightly in my professional world. We get calls on those every day, and it is pothole season, if you did not know that. So stand by. If you haven't started receiving calls about potholes, you will.
Well, we have call 311. There's a 311 app that's great. We literally have now a pothole truck that goes around filling potholes. So they've filled all the ones that they know about. The big problem is the semantics between potholes and road failure. We still have a ton of roads that need to be paved, and that just is going to take time. I mean, we're spending over 3 times what the city was spending prior to me coming into office, but we got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah. So we'll bring it back. That was a little sidebar.
Sorry.
Diversity and inclusion is essential. Well, that was my fault.
Yeah.
Diversity and inclusion is essential to economic prosperity and mobility in the Chattanooga region. D&I is an economic advantage to creating markets, attracting talent, and building a customer base.
Yep.
In what ways can the city and the business community continue to make Chattanooga more economically inclusive?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways, and we're working on a lot of them together. I would just say the most important thing, I think, for the business community in Chattanooga to do, and this is what I try to do, and that's make people understand that this is not political, it's not ideological. I get a lot of grief from my friends on the right about equity, like it's a dirty word, and look, we're talking about equality of opportunity. Right? I mean, it's easy enough to just sort of pretend like we don't have a history and that none of that stuff matters, but we do have a history, and it does matter. I mean, that echoes all the way into into the present. And all we're really talking about here is how do we best develop our human capital, all of our human capital. I mean, with the unemployment rate as it is now, it's not a secret, right, that we need like all hands on deck. We need everybody pulling on the rope in the same direction. We need people operating at full human capacity to do that. And that's what it's about, period, right? Plain and simple. It's about getting the most out of every person in Chattanooga in whatever way we can. And sometimes, does that mean doing more for some than others? Well, of course it does. I mean, my favorite analogy that I've used to a lot of my sort of, to a lot of my friends is that I coached Little League, you know, when my kids were little. And a lot of them did too, and I'll tell them, you know, if you had a couple of kids whose parents couldn't get them to practice, either, you know, they're working or they forget, or, you know, but they were good players, and you needed them on the team in order to complete the team or to do well, would you go get them and bring them to practice and maybe buy them a sandwich where the other people's parents are just bringing them to practice? Well, yeah, of course. That's equity, folks. It's not that much more complicated than that. It's doing a little more for the people that need it to get them there. Because to me, and this is not a widely not everybody accepts this definition, but for me, equity is equality of opportunity. It's about making sure that, again, we get the most out of everybody.
While we're on the topic of inclusivity, as we look to recruit businesses and talent to Chattanooga, housing remains a real challenge. How do you view the issue, and how's the city working to address attainable housing?
It's a huge issue. I'm glad you brought it up because, again, we can talk all day about workforce development and attracting jobs here, but if people can't find an affordable place to live, what good is it, right? The good news is, as you probably all know, there are a lot of housing starts going up, and we were able to carve out, $33 million, which is almost 10% of the city budget for an affordable housing fund. And we've been able to leverage that in a way, mainly through loan guarantees and some direct subsidy, or we have a plan to do this, we haven't announced it yet, to get that to effectively $100 million. And we've hired a new chief housing officer, Nicole Heyman, who just joined us, I think her first day was Friday, from New Orleans. We're super excited about it. So we will, again, we're playing catch up, but I'm very hopeful. Unlike a lot of other cities who don't have the means or the space or the capital to do this, we have all of the above. We also have a lot of land that the city owns that we can contribute to affordable housing projects. So we'll get there. And again, it can't happen fast enough. The interest rate environment right now is not helpful. As we all know, it's not helpful to anybody except probably retirees, but we'll get there.
A big part of this discussion relates to homelessness. Homelessness feels like a growing issue for Chattanooga and specifically the downtown area.
Yeah.
In what ways is your administration working to help both the businesses in downtown and the people that make up the homeless population in our city?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I talk to other mayors from across the country on a weekly basis. And this is definitely the most wicked problem that we all face because there was just an op-ed from my friend Aaron Mendenhall, who's the mayor of Salt Lake City, who's now determined that they are busing people to Salt Lake City from other parts. It's terrible. Nobody should do that. But there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that that's happening, which is a completely different problem. But we find ourselves in the position of having to deal with it one way or the other. Right, part of the issue is just housing. Period. Right, a lot of folks being pushed out of housing, and so this is related to the affordable housing problem. So it goes back to creating housing. Part of it, though, is addiction and mental illness. And what do we need to do to help folks who sometimes don't want to be helped? Right, that's a tough one, and there may need to be some legislative solutions. I will say, relative to the downtown community, we've had some constructive meetings with representatives from downtown and Steve Brooks and others, and made this controversial decision to remove the benches temporarily from downtown, and we kind of reset things with the police department to kind of make sure that we were doing everything we could do legally and constitutionally to protect the citizens downtown while respecting everybody's rights, and I think we're there. At the same time, Chattanooga doesn't have a low barrier shelter. If the police do pick up somebody who's being disruptive and take them to jail, let's say they take them to Silverdale, many times they're back downtown before the police are back downtown because Silverdale's full. So it's a tough one, folks. I mean, there's we're working really hard to come up with creative solutions, including permanent supportive housing. So the Airport Inn project's gotten a lot of press, a lot of misconceptions about that, and part of that is certainly our fault for not having been clearer about what it was and what it wasn't earlier. But what we're finding around the country is that permanent supportive housing, a place where people who used to be pre-pandemic, the average days of homelessness was maybe 30 or 45 days, and it's tough, right? But you dust yourself off and you get back up. Now that number's like 250, 200. People have been homeless for that long, and it changes you, right? There are a lot of folks who wind up addicted to a substance just to get through, and so getting them out of that takes more effort. And this concept of permanent supportive housing, where people are on staff all the time, getting them the help they need, connecting them to resources, it works. We know it works. The organizations that do it well have 93, 94% retention rates in that sort of facility. Those facilities are not homeless shelters, So again, nobody here has seen that, so nobody here really understands that, and it's our job to make sure that they do. But again, we're working on as diligently as possible on a number of creative solutions to address it.
Great. Let's shift our conversation for a moment to talk about the airport. The airport is a critical asset for both our business and citizens looking to come to and travel out of Chattanooga.
Yeah.
We do that frequently.
Yes, we do.
In what ways can the business community help continue to build on the airport's success, as well as help gain more locations and flights out of Chattanooga?
Well, as you may know, somebody probably clued you in, because you don't hear me talk about this much in the press, because it is a fairly narrow point of interest for the business community in particular, but it does matter to economic growth. Christy knows it's a huge break on economic growth. I mean, again, speaking to colleagues in Knoxville and Mayor Battle in Huntsville, I mean, I'm often reminded of the old adage that if you can't spot the sucker at the poker table, you're the sucker, right? And we are surrounded by other airports who have pulled away our service. Our leakage rate, I want to say it's 50% or better, meaning all of us, more than half of us, of Chattanoogans, drive out of Chattanooga to fly out. And I've had conversations with some of you in this room. I've done it. I try always to fly out of Chattanooga, because the irony of it is, if we all flew out of Chattanooga, we'd have better air service, right? So I think as the gate expansion project, which I'm really excited about as that happens, I think it will be good for the Chamber and the airport to work together to think about how we can encourage. I mean, maybe it's a rewards program, right? And maybe it's just some public awareness campaigning. I mean, maybe it's both, and maybe some stuff we hadn't thought of. But we need to find ways that we can encourage people to use CHA, and to start marketing again to North Georgia and other places who would much rather come up here and spend 5 minutes through TSA than deal with Atlanta or try to get through Atlanta traffic, run into a wreck and then they've missed their flight. We have some advantages, so I think we need to be a little more, I think we need to be a lot more intentional about leveraging those advantages.
Final question for you, Mayor Kelly, and this is a fun one.
Oh, great.
As you know, the holidays are quickly approaching.
Yeah.
And everyone seems to be in a giving mood, from presents to corporate gifts and charitable donations. So everyone is anxiously awaiting your answer. What is the worst and best gift you've ever received?
I know. I wish I had a better answer for you. I don't. I know this is a cop out. Well, that's not true. But honestly, I'm one of those people that it's the thought that counts. So I will say, my mom, God bless her, God rest her soul, passed away a few years back, but in her advancing years, spent a lot of time in front of the television in QVC. And she would accumulate things for Christmas that were ponderous at best, And again, she was kooky and sweet, and miss her every day, but I got some pretty weird gifts from my mom. Best, I mean, anything that Jenny or my kids give me is immediately, precious because it carries more weight. My boys have taken to buying me belts, and I always know the belts that they buy me. So, and again, Jenny's a very thoughtful gift giver too. So anything my family gives me.
Okay.
Not very exciting.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Rocks are always a safe gift.
I'm a rock hound. We spend a fair amount of time out in Wyoming, and most of the time everybody's looking up at the mountains, and I'm looking down and going, look at that. I have bowls of rocks.
I heard that.
Yeah, at the house, and people. Yeah, I'm kind of strange like that. Yeah.
Not strange at all.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps up this segment of Chamber Chat. Stick around for a brief Q&A with Mayor Kelly. But before we do that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you to our viewers for watching this video, and thank you, Mayor Kelly, for your time and thoughts. Let's give him another round of applause.